Hello friends, it's Chloe. So I have a snowstorm. As I was sharing earlier today, the power went out as I was starting to talk about the Gatekeeper card in my Wild Wisdom of the Faery Oracle. And it's been an interesting time of patience, rest, connection, and really having a little bit of a light bulb come on, spending this time in the storm with my boys and with the cats and myself, and coming to really take time to just feel the moment of being in the storm and our home, and learning to take time for gratitude in my skills, my husband's skills, and those things that I still need to help teach and instill in my children. A snowstorm is usually something just to be gotten through and maybe enjoyed if you have the personality to do that. And I found it also a time to reconnect, not just with family, but to the energy of the winter storm. There were so many trees that branches were breaking because of the weight of the snow. It's quite heavy. The area usually doesn't get snow like this very regularly. Matter of fact, I think I don't think it's record breaking, but it's like really a lot of snow falling for this area. And so one of the things I was contemplating on was just how immersed my children are and unused to being detached from electronics. I mentioned that a little bit earlier, and I want to get back to that card that I pulled earlier, the Gateway card that had such a lovely energy that I felt was reflecting in, oh, here it is. Okay, I got it here. There's the, and I have my lights dimmed. That's another thing. Oh, I got like so many different things flying through my head. So, really helping my children to, have to interact with each other, which they have to do all the time anyways, but having not as much electronics, lights, and all that involved made them really have to interact with each other. Now, this weekend, we were not completely prepared for the snowstorm. We had had a few warnings, but we had never had the power out for so long before, maybe a few hours in a day or something like that, but usually it was back on in a pretty reasonable amount of time. But I had heard when we were looking at housing, when we were considering moving to the area, that you could be without power for days if and they weren't even talking snowstorms. They were talking just like rainstorms and winds and things like that, because we're in a Bay Area here, fairly close to bays that get whales occasionally. So you can imagine the different kinds of storms and weather we get to experience here. Even though we're more inland, we're not like on the coast, like coast to the ocean. We are at the bays here. So let me gather my thoughts for a moment. One of the things I connected to was that this time around we had a few hours of power. Thus, I was able to get on earlier today. And during that time, my boys were prepping like crazy. Like, we warned them that this was just a little bit of time. We didn't know if the power would stay on or not. And it didn't, as you know, because it cut off earlier. And so they were plugging in their electronics that they wanted to be able to have access to. We charged batteries. We did all this stuff. It really appreciates and brings to mind how used to having that access to electronics, power, warming the home, and everything else. And that I am very grateful that we have our stove, because if we hadn't had that stove, we wouldn't have been able to make food. We wouldn't have been able to warm our home during this winter storm. And it is quite cold. But overall, I felt like this was good for our children as well to experience this, because it really made them kind of look at, well, what do we do besides electronics? What do we do besides video games and YouTube and all this stuff? And I was like, well, You have books you haven't read. I have paper and crowns. We have board games, card games, all kinds of stuff to do. We can tell stories. My husband baked cookies on the fireplace. I had cooked up chili and soup, and we've been doing hot cocoa on the fireplace. So it was a really awesome connecting time. And also just resting. Oh my gosh, because it's cold. The fireplace got the place nice and warm, almost to the 70s, in a good portion of the house. And basically, it was just the boys could see us doing what it would take to handle the weather without the access of electricity that makes things so easy. Like, we had to manually do a lot of stuff. We had to take all the food in the refrigerator and take it outside and the freezer and pack it with snow to keep our food good. And we had to keep track of the temperature outside to make sure it was within, bounds for keeping the perishables good. And, dude, when the power went on, I rushed to take a shower, I rushed my youngest boy. My older son had washed before a lot of things had happened. So he was so needing his hair washed, and I was about to need to, boil some water and add it to a cooler bowl of water and do the whole sponge bath routine and washing hair, which would have been fine. But this is a boy who has a lot of texture issues. And though my boys have liked swimming in the past, they've been a little avoidant of water. And I'm like, your hair has gotten to the point where we got to wash it. I washed my hair too. It's actually clean. I think the winter cold that we're experiencing here, usually there's a lot of humidity, but it's almost staticky. So I made sure to use some, conditioner, that kind of thing. And my hair is almost to my natural color. I still have little tinges of purple here and there. About ready to dye it again. But anyways, yeah, so this storm has been a blessing and kind of making me realize some things, experiencing camping at home, surviving the temp. And I feel so much for the homeless community we have here. It must be so cold out there. And I know we had it very gentle in our situation, but it was quite cold indoors too. We have one room we have to keep closed all the time because the insulation isn't great near the back door in that area. And so that room's always cold or really hot in the summer. And so we had that room closed off to keep the best heat in the main living space. So yeah, learning what parts of the house were best for keeping the heat in, all those kind of things. We had kind of been a little bit aware of these issues before. My husband has some really great skills, and I'm not without some skills myself. But my job was mostly to keep the kids distracted and entertained, and to help with cooking and bringing the food in or out depending on the power situation. And basically, I also realized how much I do not enjoy so much light in my room. For video recording, normally I have the overhead light on. There's 3 lights all together. It is actually very bright for my head, and I have been suffering with migraines for a week or more. And I have migraines off and on at different times, but I realized through the storm that I have been really allowing my lights on too much. Like, I'll even leave the closet light on just because when my kids were younger, they would wander to find me. And if there was not a light on, they would be a bit frightened. And now they're a little bit older. They're still not totally comfortable with dark closets. They're in that in-between kid and teenage. So, they still react to things a little bit, but I have found, like, I have the closet light on now. I have my twinkle lights on. This is a really good light level for me. Not the best for reading, but for being in a space and not feeling like I'm getting too much excessive stuff coming at me, this is great. So the storm has taught me to honor the fact that I don't need so much electricity on. And oh my gosh, the pressure relief off my head for not having electricity and all the electronics and everything, whatever it is, be it the refrigerator and all that stuff on, has been so relaxing and relieving that I've been like really grateful for this snowstorm that we've been experiencing, for this time of spending with family, for really appreciating our space, for kind of reconnecting and a little bit of reevaluation just in the last, let's see, it's been 3 days now. And we have another day where we're not going to be able to leave the house very easily, maybe more, because it will now be very icy. It went from snowstorm to rain. So that means ice, lots and lots of ice. So I'm really not sure if we're going to be able to get down our drive. It's very steep and curved, and the only one vehicle has chains. So we got, like I mentioned earlier, already got a communication that the schools were closed for tomorrow. So I am again going to spend valuable time with the boys doing our school week now that we're into it. And another thing that was a big, huge focus was a bunch of cleanup, like whatever we could easily clean up with the warm water back on and everything else. That was a priority. And then just prepping, because we knew that the power would most likely go off again, and it ended up doing it. And it might do it again. This is just a temporary thing. And so I was like, oh, I better take advantage of it and pop on here. So yeah, this snowstorm is creating a lot of gratitude. So if anybody's watching who's in the Northwest here in Washington, I hope that the snowstorm isn't too inconvenient for you, that you were able to prep and be in a safe space and, care for yourselves and your family as best you can. I wanted to talk about the Wild Wisdom of the Faery Oracle card, the Gatekeeper. Again, literally outside before the rain. I haven't been able to see what it's changed into since it went from snowstorm to rain. But this is what outside looked like, except for regular homes and not just trees. My backyard looks a lot like this. Snow lacing everything. We've had trees go down, branches still falling, all kinds of craziness with the weight of the snow on these trees that are not used to this kind of weather. And the essence of this card, the Gatekeeper, one of the things is being at an in-between time. Like we're in a borrowed time that the storm has created, because Mother Nature needs to do her business. And snow was part of her schedule this week in our area. And the lovely thing about that is kind of having gratitude for my husband and everything he's done for us during the storm, having compassion for my children who are not used to being without the distractions they're usually getting to, enjoy, and finding ways to help them be entertained and connect. And then also in recognizing that perhaps too much time with bright lights and electronic dependency is something that we need to look at and reevaluate. I have a very different background than my husband, in that I was raised in not always the most stable situation. I had divorced parents. I thought having parents that were divorced was a normal thing. And, the Gatekeeper reminded me that this isn't the first storm I've muddled through, survived through, be it layers of clothing. I've lived in trailers, some very well insulated, some kind of needing care and maintenance as we dealt with the weird temperatures we were in. And I've lived in very cold places during snowstorms before, and had parents and adults around as I was a child part of the time when this was happening, who had the skills to help deal with things. And this isn't the first time my husband and I have dealt with quite cold temperatures. I remember one time we were going to visit my family in the middle of winter for Christmas and Yule. And we were driving there in a car that had no heater. And so we got these like hand warmers, and I got these toasty little socks with toe that fit on the toes and the feet, and put another layer on just of socks to keep my feet from freezing in this cold vehicle. We were manually wiping the windshield as we were driving, and it was just so insanely cold. But we were making our way so that we could spend some time with my family. And we had this little, my husband had this little 4-door busted, functioning car, but no heater. And we did that. We went all the way from like Utah to California, actually to Chico, which is right near where the campfires were so devastating for paradise in the community there. So I am hoping the change in weather will help wash some of whatever's going on in that area, be it cleanse it or refresh it or what have you. Because I know this storm is traveling, and I've been reading and hearing about several storm systems that are going through. And I just hope that should anybody else have to go through snowstorm or other weather system that makes you have to stay home for a bit, that maybe you can reflect on the time you spend with your family if you're stuck with your family, or get to spend time with them. Like I was saying, the Gatekeeper made me feel like, hey, this is a bit of borrowed time to spend together and, connect and be grateful for this time we get to spend together in this situation that we hadn't totally anticipated. And again, it just made me, realized how different my life is than when I was a child. And I lived in a lot rougher conditions than my husband is able to provide for us. And my children are comparative to, I don't like to compare all the time, but like my experiences as a child, my children are, if not spoiled, very well cared for. And they have some food issues that my mom would have been like, what the frick, here's some food, eat the food. I'm a little bit more tolerant of certain things because I have always had issues with food too, and I would just kind of force my way through it because I didn't want to cause problems for my mom. But my boys are a little bit spoiled with the electronics and lots of things. And so when we went through this storm, they had to like, oh my gosh, I can't go on my electronics. What am I going to do? And they were reading. They were spending time wrestling with each other. Luckily, we had some glow-in-the-dark toy sets that were like kind of gaming sets where you get to boffer or light up different colors and use them to help light up the house a little bit to make it less dark. And there was just so many awesome little things that developed during the last 4 days. Let's see, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday, still going into Tuesday because there's school's been canceled, maybe even Wednesday. I don't know, but with the ice and all. So, I'm trying to be patient with these things they haven't had to deal with before. We lived in Utah and it snowed every year and we never had an outage this long. We had a day outage. We've had hours of no power, yes. But this was the longest we've been without electricity part of the time. And to get that break to prep for the next time when the power went out, and it did for several hours today. Luckily, the crews have been on and our power's on, but I couldn't stand having the lights on. Being able to be without the power on was actually much of a blessing and reminded me of how much comfort I find in being more natural and closer to nature without the artificial, support or ability to flick on a light switch, right? I was able to find batteries. My twinkle lights are not plugged in. They're actually on batteries, which reminds me I should probably plug them in because technically our power's on, but I just couldn't bring myself to have the lights on again. They were actually making me feel a bit stressed. So yeah, so as I was saying before, when I pulled this Gatekeeper card, and to see it remind me so close to the snow that's outside and all the trees. And we had a few more branches break in the time since I was on earlier today to now. I got to watch them break, fall, and the snow falling with them and stuff. This is definitely going to weed down some of the older growth trees in the forest around our home in the neighborhood. We're watching a few of them closely because I think one hit the side of the house on the opposite side. But luckily it wasn't a huge one, so it should be something we can manage and clear off. But we need to wait until daylight so we can see what's going on because it's really dark here. The one thing which was weird, was inside the house, our insulation is such, at least around the rest of the house, except for that back door area or the one, anyways, there were some generators going off and we couldn't even hear them in our house. At least we weren't aware of them at first. I was kind of aware of one when I got closer to the opposite side of my house over near the fireplace. But I went out to get some food and I was like, oh yeah, the neighbor has a Jenny on. Okay, cool. And we were a little concerned about our neighbors because our immediate neighbors on either side of us are older couples, retired couples, grandparents, and they had been in the area longer than us, but still, you know, as, you know, we're kind of like prime of life, I guess. And so when I was younger, even living in harsh conditions where this kind of stuff, like the places I lived as a kid, I lived in trailers. There was one part of one winter and fall where I lived in the back of a garage in some kind of room they had made into an office. There happened to be a heating unit in it and a bathroom, so we could stay there in a one-room situation. Somebody just let us stay back there. I don't even know if it was the landlords themselves or just some people who had been renting there. There's like, oh, there's a couple more weeks that we're supposed to be able to have access to this. You could stay here. And I think my stepdad was like painting the main house, so it was kind of like trade for doing some work. We could stay there until they were trying to find another living situation. My children have never had to be through anything like that, partially homeless or living in very inferior conditions. And like, this was very pleasant. Like they've always found camping it's kind of fun the first day or two. And then they're like missing all their stuff. And I'm like, well, that's why we bring charged stuff. And so you still get some of that experience, but it's really to have a different experience. That's the whole point of camping, right? Well, we got to camp in the house and they really liked that. They're like, well, this has been hard, but at least we were home and we had all our stuff and we didn't have to go anywhere. And it was kind of cool. Yeah. So there's been some gratitude. There's been some reality checks and everything else. And it's been very interesting. Just having these trailing thoughts coming in and kind of reconnecting. It's a lot easier to meditate when there isn't power going through the house. That was a real, a turn on, like a thought in my head, like, oh, I can focus right now. Wow. Is it just because the electronics are off? The power's off? Wow. Okay. So I'm really looking forward to when I can spend a bit more time outside. And if there's still some snow, and there was so much snow, oh my gosh, we got like 1.5 feet of snow on our deck on the back table. It was like looking at an icing top of a cupcake or a muffin. It was hilarious. The railings off the decks had snow so high. I mean, 1.5 feet, my husband was saying. He measured it with a long measuring type thing. I'm trying to think right now. I can't think of the word. Measuring tape, but like for building stuff, not the sewing kit type. Anyways, and so yeah, so I'm feeling that one, I need to make some kind of alternative life source. I've been doing it during readings when I was on the app. I usually dim my room and just have an immediate light source for the videos themselves. I may do that for these other videos from now on, but it made me realize that I have way too much electronic stimulation and stuff going on here. And I would like to encourage everybody, even if you're not in a storm, what if we went and tried to just be without the power, you know, a few hours of the day, a weekend, and just turn them off, you know, when it's safe to do so. If you have a fireplace and you can heat your house with your fireplace for a day, or two and see how that is, living a little bit more rugged, living a little closer to our ancestors, living and appreciating a bit more the protection and comfort and love we can have without all that technology being on. How much of it is distracting us from each other, and how much of it is spoiling our children or desensitizing them to everyday natural experiences. You know, as a pagan, if nothing else, because I consider myself kind of an eclectic fae, I get drawn into the everyday life like anybody else, but I also know that I feel more comfortable and natural when I don't have as much electric coming at me, and when I can be closer to my animals and, you know, working with my children to help them more comfortable during a little bit of an uncomfortable situation, in the sense that when the lights aren't on, it's a little scary in the house to try to go and find things about the house. I don't necessarily find it scary, but kids, you know, they get weird about dark closets and stuff like that. Oh, my cats are going off. They don't always get along. To check them in a minute. Hey, you guys. Oh goodness, my cats. Actually, they're my son's cats. All right, so yeah, dealing with them and their attitudes. And just, you know, being able to really, like, I love candles. This candle over here, which you guys can't see, but maybe I'll show you. Let's see. Over here. Oh, that's my messy closet. There you go. See right there? That candle that's lit up there? That has been on this whole time. And it hasn't even gotten, I think it's gotten a little lower, like maybe that much. Yeah. So, like I said, even I need to turn off that closet light as soon as I'm done here. I only put it on so you guys have a little bit better lighting. So I'm sorry if it's not perfect for you, but I really didn't feel like I could tolerate the overhead lighting. When the lights turned back on, I didn't realize how many lights were on in the house when the lights had gone off. And I was going around turning off lights because I was like, oh, this is way too much. Even the bathroom, normally I sometimes have that on instead of my closet on. And I was like, I cannot even tolerate that light. And I have twinkle lights set around the mirror. And that was really enough light for me. If I needed a little bit more, I just take a flashlight in there and that was enough. The overhead lights, I mean, maybe if I'm in the shower, because the curtain can make that area behind the shower and the tub a bit darker. Yeah, that's necessary. But I feel like we're overstimulated and over lit up and not encouraging our bodies to be in that natural space. Our ancestors didn't live with fully lit up homes all the time. Warmth was something that was worked for and appreciated. And you may even huddle in bed with, you know, your husband or your kids or whatever to keep warm in the winter. The cats were like all over me. My boys were sleeping on the couch to be close to the, you know, the fireplace. And then we were putting in firewood about every half hour to an hour to keep the place warm. It was very, I don't want to say primal because like we're not in a cave or anything, but it just made me really appreciate the comforts we have and the ability to care for ourselves in every way that we could. And now I'm listening to all the different sounds because, again, we're a bit sensitive and aware that we have old growth trees around us that seem to be getting offset or knocked down with the weight of the snow and weather that they've been experiencing this weekend. There's already 3 or 4 trees down around the properties around us. And there are some major branches, 1, 2, possibly 3 that have fallen around our property and 2 that hit the house that we're going to have to go and deal with. So yeah, thank you for checking out my video. I would love to hear your stories or thoughts on, reconnecting through a storm or whatever weather challenges you're having in your area. In my case, I come from kind of a rougher background where, you know, winters were colder and we had to do more to be warm. Everything from propane heating to, fireplaces and chopping wood and, bundling up together and all that stuff. And my children haven't had that experience. And so to be cut off from their everyday pleasures is quite an eye opener for them. I won't rehash everything I've already said, but I just really appreciate this opportunity to have this realization and reconnection with my family, myself, and I also feel in a way with nature and getting back to basics. So I hope everybody is doing well. Please stay warm or cool, depending on what your season you're in the different parts of the world. And may we all find messages, connections, and understanding through our experiences and our oracles helping us through different time periods. So thank you all very much, and please like or dislike. I would love to hear from you all, and bye-bye for now.